Okay, so we're going to start with talking about who I am, which was a revelation to me my first year of teaching. So when we talk about who we are, I'm actually going to take off my mask. When we talk about who we are, my very first year of teaching, my students asked me, they said, what are you? And I was like, what? And they go, well, what are you? And I said, your teacher? And they were like, yeah, no, but what are you? And I said, I'm female. And they go, but no, what are you? And I said, a mother, a daughter, a granddaughter. And they go, no, what are you? And I said, I don't know, that's what I am. And I go, no, what are you? And then one of the students said, well, like me, I'm Korean. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'm Asian. And then the kids were like, see, I told you, she's one of us. And I was like, I don't know what one of us is. Somebody said, yeah, but she's not black. And they go, it doesn't matter, she's still one of us. She's a person of color. I did not know I was a person of color. When I was growing up, there was no such thing. Okay? When I was growing up, I was in the military school system, and my schools looked like this, all of them, from kindergarten on. It was a little bit of everybody, and we were only in the same place for 1 to 3 years, and then everybody moved on. And you weren't in the same place with the same 3 years with very few people, because they were all moving on, and you might have come during their second year, you might have come during their third year, so you might have known them for 6 months and then they moved on. And it was like that, and it was like a revolving door, and if you wanted to make friends, you made friends right away, because those people were going to be gone. You didn't know how soon they were going to be gone. Okay? And and then my dad transferred to North Carolina, and in 6th grade I was in North Carolina, and that was at the beginning of desegregation, and I was like, what? And they go, and they bussed me. They bussed me across town. And I was like, why are you bussing me across town? Because we're desegregating, and I didn't know what that meant, because my schools were all desegregated from kindergarten on. They were desegregated. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that they had schools that were predominantly black, or schools that were predominantly white, or predominantly anything. I had no idea, and they moved me to the school. And so when I said that I was Asian, they were like, see, she's one of us. And I didn't identify as a person of color, because I didn't know it was a thing. So not only did I not identify with as a person of color, I started thinking about it, and then I thought, oh, you know what? I kind of grew up with white privilege, because I didn't identify as a person of color, so I didn't know. Then I started thinking about it, and then I thought, oh, you know what? I did experience some things, but at the time they just went right up my head. The one that stood out the most was when I was in the 6th grade. When I was in 6th grade, this strange young man came up to me and he goes, you're a Jap. And I was like, huh? And he goes, you're a Jap. And I go, yeah. And he goes, no, you're a Jap. And I go, yes, I'm a Jap. My mother's Japanese, so yes, I'm a Jap. And he goes, and he's like almost stomping my mouth. No, you're a Jap. And I go, yes, we've already established that. I'm a Jap. I did not know until my class identified me as a person of color that was a slur. I had no clue that he was trying to make a derogatory comment. Just went right over my head. Stayed over my head for, 20-some years? I didn't know. But boy, was he mad that I didn't know, because he walked away angrier than he was when he first started it, because he thought he was offending me, and he didn't, because if he'd have done it today, I still wouldn't have been offended. I would have just said, yeah, I know. Big deal. So what? My mom's Japanese. Deal with it. That's your problem, not mine. I'm proud of my mom. It's all good. But I didn't know. And so that was the beginning of my learning from my school experience, my learning from my students. And I learn a lot from you. I learn a lot from you every day. So my story is about why I became a teacher, and it's tied somewhat to that because everything that we do is tied to our experiences. And I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and they grew up in the same household, and their story is completely different than mine. Their perspective is completely different from mine. Their belief systems are completely different from mine. And we grew up in the same house. But our experiences, even how we experienced the same things, was different. Okay? So I can share some experiences with you. I mean, there are some experiences that are shared that we had the same, but yet how we interpreted them, how we felt them, how they impacted our lives is different because my experiences are my own. So I'm going to talk to you about why I became a teacher, and why I became a teacher is tied to my family. So I'm going to introduce you to my family as they were way back when, because they're not like this anymore. So we'll start with my daughter. This was my daughter when she was your age. I happen to think I have a beautiful daughter. My daughter is 4'11". She's in her, just beyond her mid-30s. She's going to kill me. But she looks like she's 20. Okay. She came into my first class when I was first teaching, and all the kids were like, "Oh my God, that's your daughter? Introduce me." And I said, "She's too old for you." This was my son way back when. So this was my son. This is my baby. My baby is now 27, and he is 6'4". So my daughter was 4'11", my son 6'4". My son went to school here. He was on the baseball team. He was catcher. This is a kind of a more current picture of my daughter. It's like this now. And this is more what my son looks like now. This is at Hollywood Studios, Florida, because I'm a Disney man. I'm going to Disney next week. But my son, who is 27, has been to Disneyland or World, one or the other, for, let's see, probably at least 26 times. That's how much of a Disney fan. Okay, but my story centers around my son, Neil. This is my son, Neil. This was my son, Neil, when he was 14 in the fall of 1997. So my story's old. Okay, so my story centers around what happened with my family, and particularly what happened with my son, Neil. So I'll tell you that my son, Neil, was a very structured person. He liked everything to be exactly the same. He liked structure. He liked routine. He wanted all of his days to fall out the same way. He wanted his friends to do the same things. His idea was that we would live in the house that he was born in for all of his life, because that was his house, and we did not. Because I ended up divorcing his dad, and if you're a child of divorce, or you've got parents that split, you know what that's like. It tears families apart, and that blew his routine up. And then not only did I divorce his dad, I got remarried, and I moved my whole family from Parkland to South Hill. So the reason that I moved my family was that at the time my son was in the 7th grade, he was going to Stewart Middle School. You guys know where Stewart Middle School is? Stewart Middle School is in Tacoma around 56th Street. And way back when, it was a high gang area. There was a lot of gang activity. I hope people are not on their phones, because I'm going to come in, I'm going to take them, and I'm going to put them in the cell phone thing. That is so rude. So I moved him because I was afraid that he was going to be involved in gangs. And he actually got jumped in the 7th grade, so I knew that he was going to be impacted by gangs one way or the other. And so we moved. But I'm going to back up a little bit, because in the 4th grade, Neil was riding his bike down a hill, and he needed to make a sharp left turn. He was on the sidewalk, and a truck was making a right turn, and the two collided, and Neil hit his leg, his knee, in the door of the truck and snapped it above the knee. Clean break. Clean break, but it was like this. So they took him to the hospital and they put him in traction. Anybody know what traction is? So in traction, what they do is they pulled his foot and lined up his bones, and then they hung his foot on this thing, and they hung a weight from the foot to keep the foot pulled. Okay, so that they wanted him to have his bones aligned, and then they were going to let him knit, right? And then once they started knitting, they were going to cast him and hope for the best. What happened was he was in severe pain, obviously. His leg was severely broken. So they gave him painkillers, and he was allergic to them. And because he was allergic to them, he got hives. Anybody know what hives are? What do you do when you have hives? You get itchy, right? And you wiggle and you scratch. And he wiggled and he scratched, and every time he wiggled, he knocked his leg out of traction. And then they'd have to come in and they'd have to pull it apart again and reset it. And then they'd give him a different painkiller, and he was allergic to that one. And then they said, your son's a really bad patient. He can't just lay there and be still. And I said, my son is in the 4th grade. He had his legs severely broken. He is in a lot of pain. You're giving him these things that he's allergic to, and that's making him itch, and he's wiggling, and he's pulling his leg out of traction, which causes him more pain, and you can't do anything about the pain. Don't talk to me about my kid being a bad patient. And so they said, okay, well, the only thing we can do is we can pin his leg. We didn't really want to do that because we didn't want to mess up his growth plate, because it could mean that his legs don't grow at exactly the same rate, and he could have one leg slightly shorter than the other, and it'll be an issue down the line. But we're going to pin his leg and then cast him. So that's what they did. They pinned his leg and they casted him. They casted him at an angle like this, so he couldn't be straight and he couldn't lay down. He couldn't do either. He was in a V. And they casted him. They left one leg open, and then they casted down the other and up to the waist. So that's how they got him in the V. And he had to miss 6 weeks of 4th grade. And so when he missed his 6 weeks of 4th grade, they were supposed to send somebody to bring his assignments and keep him caught up, and they did not. And he went back after missing 6 weeks of school and aced everything and passed 4th grade with A's, because my kid was super, super smart. So what's the point? The point was he was allergic to drugs. And so I told him, I said, you're allergic to drugs. And this is true, though. And I said, and you never know, the first time you do drugs, it could kill you. And that is true. No one knows how they react to drugs, and the first time you do drugs, it could be a drug that your body doesn't tolerate, and it could kill you, okay? And so I told him that, and I said, so don't do drugs, and I told him that repeatedly, and so I hoped that he listened and that he didn't do drugs. So in 7th grade, we moved to Puyallup. I kept him at Stewart Middle until the end of the year, and then he got jumped by a gang. I knew that, and some of his friends were on the fringes of gangs, and I knew that, and I just didn't want that happening. And at the time, South Hill was like a nothing. There was nothing there. It was mostly fields, and there was really nothing where I moved to. There was like a couple little housing developments, and that was it. Nothing like it is today. So I moved in there, and then starting in the 8th grade, he had to go to Stahl Junior High. And so he went the first day of school, he went to Stahl Junior High, and he said, he came home and he goes, I'm not going back. And I said, well, yeah, you are, because that's your school. No, you're going to drive me to Tacoma, and you're going to put me back in my old school. And I said, no, I'm not. You're going to this school. That's the way it is. Deal. And he's like, no, then I'm moving out. And I said, no, you're not. You're going to that school. And I said, sorry. So the next morning we got into a huge fight. He didn't want to go to school, and he said, I'm going to school, I don't care. I'm going to school. I'm going to back to Tacoma. I'm going to call my grandpa. He's going to come pick me up. And I said, no, you're going to go to Stahl Junior High. Get ready to go, because we need to go. And he said, no, I'm not going. And then he proceeded to break things. The first thing he did was, at the time, his brother was a baby. And so I live in a split level, and so there was a baby gate on the stairwell so that the baby couldn't get down the stairs or mess with the stairs, right? So the first thing he did was he kicked down the baby gate. Then he put a big dent in the dishwasher and maybe the refrigerator. And then the next thing I knew, he grabbed something and he was going to put it through the TV. And while he did that, I grabbed the phone, I dialed 911, I called the police, and I had my son arrested for domestic violence. Because that's the mom I am. So the police came and they handcuffed my son, and I'll tell you what, watching your child be arrested when you were the one that called and had them arrested was a really difficult thing. But I let them handcuff my son, and I let them take my son away. Because I knew that I needed to get the courts involved, because he was over the age of 13, and once you get over the age of 13, what parents can and can't do becomes very, very limited. And my son was suffering from depression. I had tried to get him diagnosed from the age of 8, and they told me there's no such thing as depressed kids. And I said, excuse me? And they go, your son can't suffer from depression, he's too young. And I said, yeah, no. And they go, no, he's not depressed. And I said, yes, he's depressed. I would know. First suicide attempt at age 13. Don't tell me my kid is not depressed. Been there, done that. Okay? And they said, he's not depressed, we can't. So I had to get the courts involved. What the courts did, he got put into the diversion program. Anybody know what diversion program is? It's kind of like a probation thing. You have to do a contract, a behavior contract, a school contract. And as part of his diversion, he got court ordered into counseling. Oh, go figure. So I got my counseling that I wanted for my son. I think he had to go for 6 months. He didn't want to go to counseling. His dad didn't want him to go to counseling. And so a week before counseling sessions, he would say, do I have to go to counseling? And I said, yes. And he goes, why? I'm going to go, and I'm not going to say anything to the counselor. I'm just going to sit there. And I said, well, that's your prerogative. Go and sit there. You're still going to counseling. And he goes, yeah, but it's a waste of time. It's a waste of your time to take me and wait and then bring me home. And it's a waste of your money because you have to pay for counseling. And I said, my money, my time, you're going to counseling. His dad, on the other hand, was, you're the one that's crazy. There's nothing wrong with him. If it wasn't for you, he wouldn't be doing this. So this is stupid. And this was the message that he kept feeding my son. Oddly enough, even though my son pretty much didn't say anything to the counselor, not really, he felt calmer and more at peace for the week following counseling. And then we would start over again. Do I have counseling next week? Yes, you have counseling next week. Why do you insist on taking me to counseling? Because I want you to be well. I want the best for you. Yeah, but it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. I'm not going to talk to counseling. I said, my time, my money, you're going. And I took him to counseling. Now, he was only court ordered to go for 6 months, and the 6 months came and went, and I still took him to counseling. And his dad was doing this. This is so stupid, you're the one that needs to go. And I said, oh, well, I've already been to counseling, so got that one taken care of. No, he's going. You don't understand. He's depressed, and he needs help. And he goes, no, he's not. It's just you. You're crazy. You're making him crazy. And I said, well, whatever. He's going. And so his father kept in his ear, and finally he said, isn't my court-ordered counseling done? And I said, yeah. And he goes, so why do you keep taking me to counseling? And I said, because I can take you to counseling until you tell the counselor that you don't want to go. And so then I took him to 3 or 4 more counseling sessions before he finally told the counselor, because his dad wouldn't get out of his ear, that he didn't want to go. Okay? And then his behavior got worse. And then I started having to chase him down. So this was pre-cell phones. They had cell phones, but they were like these gigantic things. They looked like walkie-talkies. They didn't have very much range, and they were horrifically expensive to even get service for. So nobody had them, right? So we didn't have cell phones. So I had a landline. And I had caller ID, and I didn't take blocked numbers, and so every time a number came across the screen, I would write it down, and I had a list of the caller ID number and the name that came with it, and I kept that list, and I needed my son to be home by 9 o'clock. Okay? So he started being later and later and later. So around between 8 and 8:30, I would start on that list, and I would start calling all these kids. And I would call and I'd say, hey, this is Neil's mom. Is Neil there? Or have you seen him? And they would say, no, he's not here. I saw him at school today, or I saw him a couple hours ago, or I heard that he was going to so-and-so's house, whatever, right? And he could have been sitting right there. Who knows? And I said, okay, well, I just need Neil home. I need him in my house by 9 o'clock. And I said, because if he's not in my house by 9 o'clock, this is what's going to happen. I said, at 9 o'clock, if he's not in my house, I'm going to call 911, and I'm going to report him as a runaway. And I said, here's the thing. You know and I know that being a runaway is not illegal. And the police don't really chase after runaways. Better not be on the phone. I'll have Miss Anderson. So, I said, but even though it's not illegal for him to run away, it is illegal to harbor one. It's illegal to have a known runaway in your home and not report that you know the location of the said runaway. And I said, so, if I find out that my son was in your house 1 minute after 9 p.m. and I have filed my runaway report, I am going to call the police and I am going to file a harboring runaway report against your parents, and the police are going to come knock on your door to see if you're harboring my son. Remember, I'm the psycho mom that had her child arrested. Okay? So, would you keep my son? Or would you say, I want to be your friend, but I don't want police knocking on my door? My parents would not deal well with your psycho mom sending the police to my house. So, you need to find someplace else to be. Remember, my goal was just to get my son home. That was it. So Neil walked in the door every day right before 9 o'clock. One day he walked in, I had dialed 9 and I was about to punch 1 when he walked, when he came slamming through the door, cursing and screaming. And every time he came in cursing and screaming. Why are you bothering my friends? You're a psycho. Leave my friends alone. They don't have anything to do with this. And and every other curse word that you can think of, yelling and screaming at me, leave my friends alone, what's wrong with you? And I would look at him and I'd go, okay, you're home, and walk off. Goal accomplished. My only goal was to get my son home. My only goal was to have my son where I knew that he was safe, or where I hoped that he was safe. So, he had begun writing reports at school, book reports and other little things for English, and all of his reports were about how drugs ruined lives. And he had started screaming about his friends. And he'd come home and he'd scream about this friend. So-and-so was high today, and they're doing drugs and they're ruining their life, and on and on and on and on about all this, anti-drugs. He was very anti-drug in his screaming and yelling. And yet at the same time, in my mind, I'm going, you're screaming at your friends for doing drugs, and I'm pretty sure you're doing them. So, psycho mom that I was, I searched his room. If you knew your mom was psycho and you knew she was searching your room, is that where you would put your drugs? Oh. So I searched his room, I searched the dining room and the kitchen and the bathroom, including inside the toilet tanks, and I searched the washer and the dryer and the garden and the garage and my car and my husband's car and the baby's room and his sister's room and the closets and my own room on a regular basis. And I never found drugs. You know what I did find? It was the weirdest thing, and I didn't connect it then. You know what Bounce is? The dryer sheets? I found that I was going through boxes of Bounce like water. Every couple days I'd need a new box of Bounce. And and I bought like 160 sheets at a time. That means 160 loads of laundry. My Bounce was disappearing. Why do you think my Bounce was disappearing? What do you use Bounce for? What do you use Bounce for?
Laundry.
What's it supposed to do to the laundry?
It's supposed to freshen the smell.
It's supposed to freshen the smell.
Covering his tracks.
So he was freshening the marijuana smell right out of all of his belongings in my dryer by boxes of Bounce at a time. I never did find drugs. The other thing that, even though we didn't have cell phones back then, we did have something else. We had pagers. You guys know what a pager is? Okay, back then there were only two kinds of people that had pagers. Any ideas about who those were? Who had pagers? Doctors and dealers, and my son sure as heck wasn't a doctor. He wanted a pager. I said no. Dad said yes and bought him one. So he had a pager, and I said, you don't need a pager. I said, only drug dealers need pagers, and he doesn't need to be dealing drugs. And of course, his dad's response was, it's your fault. You're the one that's psycho. If you leave him alone, you're blowing everything out of proportion. You're the reason that he's the way he is. And I was like, okay, whatever. But my son had a pager. Of course, he ignored the pager when I would page him to call me. But he had a pager. I never did find drugs. Does that mean he wasn't using? No, I did find evidence later of the Bounce, right? But one day, we were sitting in the stairwell, because I have a 2-story house. We were sitting in the stairwell. He was sitting on one stair facing this way, and I was sitting on the other one facing that way. And we were having a conversation, and he said to me, he said, Mom, you should pat yourself on the back. He said, because remember all those years that you told me I was allergic to drugs? He said, well, from the 7th grade on, everybody was pushing drugs at me. All day long, they were pushing drugs at me. And he goes, and I didn't do them, Mom. I didn't do them, and I didn't do them, and I didn't do them, but now I know. And I said, I don't understand. You rant and rave about your friends doing drugs. All of your reports that you're writing are about how bad drugs are for you and how they ruin lives, not just the person's life, but their family's lives and their friends' lives and everything else. So why? Now my son, I need a moment. And my beautiful baby boy looked at me and he said, because Mom, you told me that if I did drugs, I'd die. And I woke up one morning, I didn't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. And I've done all these stupid drugs, and I'm still here. I'm still here. I said, oh my God, Neil. And so, where do you go from there? You just keep checking the rooms, searching the rooms, and tracking your kid down and hoping for the best. So then his friend, one of his friends, one of the ones that was actually doing drugs, called and he goes, I just wanted to let you know that Neil's been running with the Crips. And I said, excuse me? And he goes, well, he hasn't joined, but he's running with the Crips. So I called Neil's dad and I said, do you know that your son's running with the Crips? And he goes, he hasn't joined a gang. Get over it. You're blowing things out of proportion. It's no big deal. And I said, yes, it is a big deal. And so then a couple weeks go by and I get another phone call. Now, he wasn't running with the Crips at my place. He was running with the Crips when he was doing visitation with his dad. I get another phone call and it's the same kid. It's Jeremy. And he goes, I just want to let you know that now Neil's running with the Bloods. And I said, whoa. You told me he was running with the Crips. And he goes, well, yeah, he's doing that too. And I said, but you just said he was running with the Bloods. And he goes, yeah, he's running with them both. Now, this was in the time when drive-by shootings were a big thing in Tacoma, where he was running with his Bloods and his Crips. So, why do you think he was running with rival gangs? Why was he running with rival gangs? Because he wanted to kill himself. He figured if one gang didn't shoot him, maybe the other one would. His dad told me I was crazy. He says, that's not how it works. And I said, so what do you think? I said, so you think Neil's standing with his friends on the corner, and the rival gang drives up, and they stop the car, and they go, excuse me, are you a member of this gang? And Neil goes, no. And they go, well, can you step over there because I'm shooting these guys? Do you think that's how it works? And I said, do you think that if there's a report of illegal activity and the cops are patrolling and they pick up known gang members and Neil's in the midst of those known gang members, that the police are just going to say, oh, we don't know you, so you can go? I said, it's not how it works. What is wrong with you? And his dad's response was, you're psycho, you're blowing everything out of proportion. And I said, listen, I'm going to get a call that my son's been shot and I don't want to get that call. You need to do something. And his response was, you're blowing everything out of proportion. So then I get another call from Jeremy, and Jeremy says, I just wanted to let you know that Neil has a gun. I said, he's running with the Bloods, he's running with the Crips, and now he has a gun. And he said, yeah. So I call his dad, and I go, my son's running with the Bloods, he's running with the Crips, and now he has a gun. And he goes, yeah, I know, Grandpa bought it for him. Excuse me? Well, he feels that he needs protection. You are not figuring out that if he feels he needs protection, that there is something wrong? Hello? You're blowing everything out of proportion. Just leave it alone. You're just psycho. I said, I'm going to get a phone call that my son's been shot. So Neil's behavior was getting worse. He got suspended at school for something stupid. And then I told him, so the diversion officer, the psychologist, the teachers, all the other adults told me, you should send Neil to live with his dad. His dad needs to have him face to face so that he can experience it and do something about it. And I was running ragged. I had a baby. His sister was 11 or 12. I had a full-time job. I was tearing my house apart on a daily basis looking for drugs. I was calling all these numbers every day, tracking my son down to get him home. I was on my last leg. And I called his dad and I said, listen, you need to have a conversation with Neil and you need to tell him that if he gets in trouble one more time, that he's got to come live with you. And he said, okay, I'll do that. And I said, okay, make sure you have the conversation. Okay, so that was really stupid. I mean, I've done a lot of stupid things, but that was really super stupid on my part. So Neil I got a phone call. Neil had been smoking on the bus, and they turned the bus around, and he got suspended. So the principal knew me on a first name basis. My phone was memorized. And he called me and he said, Neil's been suspended for smoking on the bus. And I said, oh my God. So I called and I left a message on the answering machine. Remember, no cell phones. I left a message on the answering machine. Neil, you knew that you had to toe the line. If you did one more thing, you were going to go live with your dad. So your dad's coming to pick you up tonight. Pack up your stuff. You're going to go live with your dad. But guess what? Dad never had that conversation with me. Neil had no idea. Neil picks up the phone, calls the school, talks to the principal, cusses the principal out, threatens to kill the principal, and gets expelled. Principal calls me back. I go home. Neil has thrown some stuff in some boxes in his room. He's broken some furniture, put a hole in the wall, but there's no sign of him. His dad pulls up, and about 2 minutes later, Neil comes barreling down the road on his bicycle, goes in through the garage, starts packing the boxes, taking his boxes and carrying his stuff out to his dad's car. And I look at him taking that box out to his car, the first box out, and I'm like, what am I doing? No. And I said, I changed my mind. I don't want you to go live with your dad. Forget it. Put your stuff back. We'll figure this out. And I'm crying, and he's carrying his stuff out, and he's ignoring me. And his dad is saying, no, go ahead and put your stuff in. Let him go to my house and cool off for a few days. And I said, no, I changed my mind. I don't want him to go. Don't make him go. Don't take my son. And Neil won't even look at me. And he comes out of the house and he puts the last box in. He goes back in and he comes out one more time. And he has an empty Jack Daniels bottle in his hand. And I'm standing there and I'm crying, please put your stuff back. Please don't go. I don't want you to go. Please, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. And he takes that bottle and he looks at me and he flings that bottle at me and he says, I hate you. You're not my mother anymore. And he gets in that car and his dad drives him off. And on the way to his dad's house, see, Neil didn't know he was going to get sent to his dad's house. As far as he was concerned, his life was over because he didn't want to go live with his dad. On the way to his dad's house, his dad tells him, your mom didn't want you anyways. All she wanted was a child support, and you're not even worth that anymore. And my son calls his drug friends in Puyallup, and they come pick him up, and they take him, and his dad will not even call and look for him, won't call and report him as a runaway, won't do anything. And I called the police, and they said, well, if he was in his dad's custody at the moment, then his dad has to make the call. And I said, what? And his dad wouldn't, and my son was gone for 2 weeks. And then he calls me in the middle of the night on my house phone. And I have two phones. We have a business. And so he calls on the house phone. And I get the caller ID, because you know me. I'm all about caller ID. And he calls me and he says, I hope you're happy, Mom. I'm really going to kill myself. Tonight I'm going to do heroin. That should do the trick. You ruined my life. You're not my mom anymore. I hope you're satisfied with what you did. And I'm sobbing, and I said, please, Neil, just come home. Please just come home. And he goes, your house is not my home anymore. And on, and then he hangs up. And little moments of waking up, he told me what happened. He said, so Mom, Jeremy and I went to a house and we knew there were guns there and we broke in and we stole the guns. They actually had help from a member of the house. They left a window open for them to break in and get the guns. So we came back to my dad's and we emptied the guns. They were supposed to be empty, and we smoked some pot, and then I went out off the front porch, and I was standing on the front yard, and Jeremy came out. He was standing in the doorway behind me, and he raised his arm and he said, "Bang, you're dead, Neil." And I heard this noise, and I felt this sting, and I looked down, and there was all this blood pouring out of me. So I went in the house, and I got some dish towels, and I put them on my wound, because you're supposed to put pressure on a bleeding wound. And I put pressure on it, and I picked up the phone, and I called 911 and said that I needed an EMT, and reported a drive-by that I'd been the victim of a drive-by shooting. I described a random car and random occupants, and then I told Jeremy that he needed to take the guns, and he needed to leave, and he needed to ditch them someplace. And I sat on the porch and I waited for the EMTs to show up. And the EMT said he was sitting calmly on the porch, waiting for us to show up, and describe the events. And the whole way to the hospital, all he wanted to know was, is Jeremy okay? Jeremy, on the other hand, went into shock. He freaked out. He went running out of the house, threw the guns in the bushes off the porch, and waited and was there, got arrested, got taken to Raymond Hall, got put in solitary confinement, suicide watch. It was Memorial Day weekend. They couldn't find his mom. His mom went camping. No cell phones. His mom didn't show up for about 5 days. So he was in solitary confinement. Nobody would tell him what happened. They would not let me visit because I was the victim's mom. And they were afraid that I would retaliate. They wouldn't let me talk to him. And so he sat under suicide watch because they couldn't find his mom. And he never spoke about a dad, so I don't know about his dad. Neil got sent to St. Clair. They did a drug assessment. They actually did. He'd been out of school. His dad had taken him out of school because he wouldn't stay. So he'd been out of school, and they had to assess him because he was going to have to go back to school. If he went to Raymond Hall, he was going to have to go to school because they make you go to school. And so they assessed him, and he had gone through 8th grade, so he was in his 9th grade year, and he tested out college level English and 12th grade math and science with an 8th grade education. My child was brilliant. My child was beautiful. My child was compassionate. He was the best person I have ever known. And he made mistakes. He made mistakes. But who doesn't? I became a teacher because I couldn't save my kid. In the meantime, I've had at least 12 kids come to report to me that they were suicidal and get into some kind of a program. I had one young lady who came to me a few years after I had talked to her. She came and visited me, and she says, "You didn't know this, but when I was in your class in 9th grade, I was an alcoholic." And she goes, "And I've been clean and sober 18 months because you told me you believe in me. You told us that we could always turn around and change our path." And she goes, "And I kept hearing your voice saying you believed in me and that I could turn around. And so I put myself in rehab and I'm clean and sober. And I became a teacher because you need somebody that believes in you. And I believe in you." And so I would tell my story. I went to the DARE program at my daughter's school. They invited me to speak, and they said, "Oh, you got to tell your story." So I said, "Okay." So I did. So I told my story. And they said, "Oh, you got to be a teacher." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't have my college degree." And they go back to college. And I go, "Okay." And I did. I went back to college. in my late 30s, early 40s. I went back to college, and I got my college degree, and I got my teaching certification, and I changed careers, one that made more money to this one, because I didn't save my kid. So I took these pictures because I wanted this to be the worst thing that ever happened to my son. But 7 years later, Memorial Day weekend, 2005, my son was in a vehicle that had expired tabs, and they got pulled over, and they had been smoking marijuana, and so they got detained. And the officer took the driver out and put him in his vehicle, and then he took my son out, and my son was carrying. And my son panicked, and my son said, "Please, I just want to go home. I just live down the street. Just let me go home. I just want to go home." And the officer said, "No, I've got to pat you down." And my son panicked, and he pulled his weapon on the officer. The officer, by his own admission, could disarm my son. He slapped his arm away, and then he shot him point blank. My son fell to the pavement on the driveway, and the officer went around, and my son still had the gun in his hand, and backed off and kept shooting back at my son. And this is witness account of the residents in the home who were standing in the window watching this happen. Continued to shoot at my son, and finally, what are you going to do when somebody keeps shooting at you? You're going to shoot back. I'm sorry. I don't care how good of a person you are, you're going to shoot back. Well, I probably wouldn't. I'd just die. I've already told my son that. He said, "If somebody shot at you, you would just die." And I said, "Yep." And he wounded the officer in the leg. The officer called for backup. There was an off-duty officer in the area. He came to the scene. My son's friend was still in the police vehicle. Neil at this point was laid out on the driveway. He couldn't even sit up anymore. He was laid out on the driveway, but the gun was in his hand. It was still in his hand. The officer swears that my son was trying to cock the gun so that he could shoot him. The residents of the home swear that my son was immobile, except for that his head was like this and his eyes were staring at them. They said, pleading, "Please do something." And the officer said, "Drop the weapon, drop the weapon, drop the weapon," stood over my son's body at his feet and shot into him. And my son died on scene of 13 gunshot wounds. Is that the end of my story? No. I became a teacher because I didn't save my son. And I thought, if I cared enough, if I worked hard enough, if I told my students that I believed in them, if I loved them enough, maybe I would keep at least one family from this. Just one. Just one family. Save just one person, because I didn't save my son. And I know that's a hard story, but it's a story of hope, because I believe in you and I care about you and I love all of my students, even the ones that treat me horribly, even the ones that curse at me. I don't care. I love you all because I know that you are worthy and you are special and you are going someplace and you are going to make something of your lives. I know that in my heart of hearts. I know that. And I believe in you, and you need somebody that will tell you they believe in you. You need somebody that is there for you. And maybe I can't solve your problems. I probably can't, but I sure as heck can listen. And if you have something and I can't find an answer for you, I sure as heck will dig deep to see what resources are out there for you. You are like the drop of water in a pond, sending out ripples. Make sure that those ripples are positive, that you're touching others in a positive way. Do the best for yourself and do the best for each other. And remember that this is a story of hope. I lost my son, but look what I got. Look what I got. I got you. Thousands of you in 20 years. I got you. When you graduate and you walk across that stage, every diploma that gets carried across that stage is a diploma for Neil in my heart. And I will do anything I can for you. But you need to believe in yourself, and you need to know that there really are people that care. There really are people that may be strangers to you, but they still care what happens to you. And I'm one of those people. You are the last group to hear my story ever. I'm done. Because I'm not coming back after this year. I'm done. I'm retiring. But if this wasn't the best 20 years, I don't know what was. Be your best you. I believe in you. There are a lot of adults in this building that believe in you. Be your best you. That's it. If you have questions, you can ask me. Obviously, I'm an open book. Oh, part of my story that I didn't say. So I told you that, like emailing a mom and all that stuff. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I had a brain tumor. I arrested my daughter for domestic violence too. What else? I told you I was suicidal, right? I lost count. I don't know how many times I've tried. But I do know what depression is. Nobody can explain it to you. If you are a person that suffers from depression, you can't explain it to anybody else, and nobody knows your experience, guaranteed. Because nobody lives your life. But live your best life. Every minute of every day, live your best life, because you deserve the best. Every minute of every day, you deserve the best. So you have questions? No? It's funny, I tell this to 6th and 7th grade, believe it or not. I told it to 6th and 7th grade. I actually got banned at Spanaway Junior High for a couple of years. They said it was too traumatic. And the kids petitioned. I had over 200 signatures petitioning to allow me to tell my story. And I said, just let it go. But I told it to 6th and 7th graders, and it's really interesting because 6th and 7th graders are very, very open, and they tell you everything. And the teachers were amazed because the teachers didn't know, oh, my dad's an alcoholic. Oh, my mom's in jail. Oh, my sister's doing drugs. Oh, my uncle is a pedophile. I mean, the stuff that came out of those 6th and 7th grade mouths was, and the teachers were like, oh my God, that explains so much. And it does. You have stories to tell, share them. Find someone you trust and share them. Don't hold them. Don't let them weigh you down. Last period, somebody asked me how I got through my son's death, which, by the way, the Spanaway Junior High choir, 3 members of the choir came and sang. I Hope You'll Dance, that was the song I wanted. And there were 3 to 5 gangs at his funeral. Rival gangs at his funeral. Of course, the Crips and the Bloods. I think there were Latin Kings. But they were there, and they knew they were going to be there, and there was no issue. Because what Neil would do is he would get kids off the street, and he would harbor them, no matter where they were from. He'd give them a safe place for however long they needed to stay. They'd hang out and hide in his room, and he'd feed them there. Because that's who he was. Just because you do a bad thing doesn't make you a bad person. But a student asked me, well, how did I get through it? You're how I got through it. Seeing your smiles, seeing your tears, watching your concerts, watching your plays, watching your sports, seeing you be successful at something. That's how I got through it. You were my rock, my safe harbor. So find a rock, find a safe harbor. Be your best you. Anybody in this class have any questions? He made the papers, by the way. It was not nice. They printed this story and my father canceled his subscription to the newspaper. I couldn't open a newspaper for years. His dad didn't want to have a funeral, but he did post an obits. I did have a funeral and I posted one too. So I wrote him a poem to tell him that I loved him because I didn't know if he knew. Everybody tells me that he did, but he was student of the month. My daughter's dare report is in here. There was a couple more pictures of Nino.
Please excuse the interruption. BSU has been canceled except for the members attending the ILT meeting.
I almost put this on a billboard. But his dad probably would have sued me. Because, you know, I'm psycho. It's all my fault. His father really did love him. He just couldn't deal with the fact that his son had depression or that his son wanted to die. So his way of dealing with it was to blame somebody else and think it didn't exist. And in the meantime, my son suffered. But now he's not suffering anymore. Okay, guess what? You didn't have any math today. See, sometimes there are good things that come out of your teacher talking to you. If you could do me a favor and stack the chairs so that poor Lila